This is the anthem. Here's what you came for. This is the moment. Magic was made for. Come on, let's light up the sky now. You feel the magic happening right now.
Hello there. Welcome back to Fan Fatales.
Take a ride with us on the Hogwarts Express.
Walk down Main Street with our best super pals.
And defy gravity as we talk about all things fandom.
Hello and welcome back to Fan Fatales. Hello and welcome back to Fan Fatales, a member of the Real Fans Podcast Network. I'm Emma, and this week we have a very special and exciting guest. Our guest today is Mr. Ridley Pearson, who is an Edgar nominee and for #1 New York Times bestselling author of more than 50 award-winning suspense and young adult adventure novels, including The Kingdom Keepers and Peter and the Starcatcher series. It's so nice to meet you.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Again, as I was telling you, like right before we started, I've been a huge fan of your books for almost like 10 years now. I know I've talked about them so much on the show before. And yeah, I'm just excited to meet you.
You'll never know how much that means to me. In all sincerity, that just means the world to me. I'm still writing them.
Yeah, you are. And I'm
all
still
these
reading
years
them.
Later. Yeah. Well, great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to start with some like general questions about you as an author, and what made you want to get into being a writer, and how did you get started in the first place?
You know, I came out of college and I was a singer-songwriter for almost a decade, and I just loved it. I still play music, but it was not any kind of a career. And maybe halfway into those 10, 11 years, I started writing scripts, actually. I started writing TV scripts thinking I might sell one. I never did.
Yeah.
But I got the bug, and the music kept me alive, and I was able to work with some mentors and write. I think I wrote 1 million words before I got published. And it was a terrific learning curve. I had so much to learn. Now I'm teaching at Boise State University, but so it was kind of a comedy of errors in a way. I never would have seen myself as a writer. I always thought I didn't think I was anywhere near smart enough to be a writer. I read all through my childhood and just, adored writers and revered writers. Yeah. So to eventually be a published writer and have a number of books out, it's really just, it's a dream come true.
Yeah, that's awesome. Again, you being on this show is just like I wish I could go back and tell like middle school Emma reading those books for the first time.
You're so sweet.
I remember, and I know now, but I remember, I think it was in 8th grade, and I went to the 24-hour Disney event dressed in all black, like the Kingdom Keepers, going
so
like
great
to the night. I don't have a picture. I wish I did, but yeah, I
that
remember
is
that.
So great.
Yeah,
I've had so much fun with the Kingdom Keepers, my gosh, and I'm still, as I say, I'm still going. I'm going to be in Disneyland over D23, and they've arranged for me to do a pretty deep dive on more research into Disneyland. So I'll be doing that on a Friday.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And do you have any advice for young people who want to be authors?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a cliche, but the 3 most important things are read, read, read.
Yeah.
I think too many of us are on our phones these days to understand what reading a book really is. But it seems that from the author friends I have, it seems that we all were reading 2 or 3 books a week when we were kids.
Yeah.
Just eating them up. And you can't, last night I was reading, of course, and you can't get any better at it without reading. So I don't read enough. I wish I read more. But every time I read a sentence, I gain something from it. And I have bookshelves and bookshelves and bookshelves of a zillion books that I've read, and I continue to read all the time. But other than that, once I got started, I think the best, and it was just sort of self-taught experience, was
Yeah.
that you keep your bottom in the seat. It's just so easy to say, "Oh, I'll make a cup of tea, or I'll get a cup of coffee, or I think I'll answer this phone call, or I wonder what the dog's doing." And you have to stay in the seat and kind of put a seatbelt on your chair and lash it down and write. You just have to write, 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 write. I do
Right.
so many drafts of all these books because
Yeah.
I just don't get them right the first time. And I'm a massive outliner. So I know everything that's going to happen, and I still don't do it right.
Yeah.
So every book you read of mine has been rewritten at least 4 full times, and then a couple
Wow.
polishes and a copy edit, and a lot of work with the editor.
Yeah.
Editors are super important. So I would never suggest to early writers to use your family or even friends as your first readers when you're trying something and trying to get, because they won't be honest with you. And
Yeah.
you need to find somebody down the block, or your teacher, or some college student that's a sister of somebody who can be more objective, because everybody's going to tell you, "Oh, it's so good." Well, it isn't very good, honestly. You need to do a lot more work on it, and
Yeah.
that's what, even with all the books I've published, my editors are constantly writing me letters to say, "Nice try, now let's do this." And
Wow.
it's just the way it is. It's a
Yeah.
long process. You have to get your ego out of the way. You have to be willing to try changes. It doesn't mean you always keep them. But if my editor says, "I really don't like the way you're dealing with Charlene in Kingdom Keepers," I'll say, "Okay, so what's happening?" And she will typically give me half a page on that, and I'll read it and go, "You know what? She's right. And I
Yeah.
ought to try it with that in mind." So I go through the whole book just in the Charlene parts and try to improve them and send them to her. And she goes, "You're close, but you aren't there." And you do it again. She goes, "Okay,
Yeah.
great. Stop. And now let's work on Finn,"
Yeah.
and off you go. So it's just endless.
Yeah.
And at some point, the editor says, "Stop, enough," and that's a great
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned Charlene first, because she's personally my favorite of
She's one of my favorite
the
too.
five.
And I have a huge crush on Amanda.
Oh, I love
I,
Amanda.
I don't know what it is about
Yeah.
Amanda, but typically my editorial letters come back, "Love Amanda, but try to cut about 2/3 of what you've done," because I just
Oh my
overwrite
gosh.
Amanda in
Yeah.
every book. And they go, "It's a little too fan stuff here. You're getting a
Yeah.
little too big a crush. Tone it back a little." It's very
Oh,
fun. But I
yeah.
just love Amanda. I don't know why.
Yeah.
She was going to be on, I don't know, 3 pages of the book. That's in the outline. Now, to me,
Wow.
she's one of the major characters in the whole series.
That's
So you never
awesome.
know.
Yeah.
Some characters just jump off the page. You can
Yeah.
see them, you can feel them, you fall in love with them. You want to keep putting them out there and
Yeah.
find fun things. So it's just very interesting how all that works.
Yeah. So before we get into more Kingdom Keepers talk, I mentioned Peter and the Starcatcher, which is another book
Yeah.
series I loved so much. I'm a huge Peter Pan and Neverland girl. So reading like your prequel to the Peter Pan tale was
Right.
so cool.
Yeah,
But I know that you wrote it with Dave Barry. So how
I
did you guys
did.
meet?
So we met. We both are, or were, or we never know whether it's were or are, but we've been playing music together
Yeah.
in an all authors rock band for 26 years.
Wow.
And I had been a huge fan of Dave Barry's. So it was a little intimidating the first day I went in to play music with everybody. Stephen King was there, and Amy Tan, and
Wow.
Dave Barry, and Barbara Kingsolver, and all these amazing writers,
Yeah.
and me. And it was like, what am I doing here? But I can play music. I'm not great, but I was okay. And Dave and I were both runners, and so we saw
Yeah.
each other in the lobby of the hotels. We did tours with this band to raise money, and we've been playing in that band for 26 years now. And
Wow.
we had gotten to be friends, and we were playing one of these shows in Miami, and I was staying at his house. And he asked me what I was up to, and I said, I was reading to Paige, was our first daughter,
Yeah.
and Paige and I were reading Peter Pan. And
Wow.
she put her hand across the book and said, "Dad, how did Peter Pan meet Captain Hook in the first place?" And I just went, "Oh my gosh, why don't I know the answer to
Yeah.
this?" And then I thought, I can answer this. And so I told Dave about this experience, and I said, I really don't know what I'm going to do. And then it dawned on me, and I said, because at the time I killed people for a living. I wrote murder mysteries.
Yeah.
And they were pretty serious, and some of them were pretty gruesome. And I thought, I don't know, I'm probably going to write some psycho kid book and not do the right thing. And I said to Dave, you write booger jokes, and I kill people for a living, and I wonder if we could do this together. And
Yeah.
he literally pounded the kitchen table and said, "I'm in."
Wow.
So off we went, having no idea how two people write a book. It's hard enough for one person to write a book.
Yeah.
Two people is like 5 times as hard. It's exponential. But boy, was it fun. And I laughed. I laughed for 10 years writing with Dave Barry.
And I'm a huge theater person. And of course, Peter and the Starcatchers was turned into a play.
Yeah.
What
So
was
Peter
the
and the
process
Starcatcher
of that?
Peter and the Starcatchers was optioned by Disney, both live action and animation, to be a full-time movie. And then live action had decided it should be animated. And right as they decided that, Pixar merged with Disney. And John Lasseter, who was at the time head of Pixar, said he really loved the story, but they work in 6-year cycles. And he said the first time we would even think about doing this would be 7 years from now, and then it would take 6 years to be done, which was like 13 years. And Dave and I said, I don't think we're willing to wait 13 years. So we took it off the market. And to our surprise, Tom Schumacher, who actually had been at animation for some of the really big early successes like Aladdin and just a whole bunch of them, he was now head of Disney Theatrical. And a young guy who was not really interning with them, but was just sort of associated with them, a guy named Rick Ellis, who was really busy writing a script with a friend about Frankie Valli and the early days of New Jersey Frankie Valli band that would later become a little thing called Jersey Boys.
Jersey Boys, yeah.
But he didn't, at the time, there was no Jersey Boys. And Rick was reading things for Tom to see if they might someday be a decent fit for Disney Theatrical. And he happened to read Peter and the Starcatcher. And Rick Ellis just loved the book. And he walked into Tom and said, of everything you've given me to read, this is the book that needs to go to Broadway.
Yeah.
And it's a tricky book, right? It's a prequel. It's funny in places. It's scary in places.
Yeah. And, it's a prequel to one of the most beloved stories.
To this iconic thing. Do you dare even do this? Which we faced in writing it, honestly. We didn't know what we were getting into. We thought we were writing a book for our kids.
Yeah.
We didn't think we were going to do more than 8 copies. Go down to Kinko's. Dave would take 4. I'd take 4. And I mentioned it to my editor at the time. I was working on the first Kingdom Keepers. And I said, Dave and I are writing this prequel to Peter Pan. And she wrote back, what? And I said, yeah. And she said, I want to see that right now.
Yeah.
So I got Dave's permission and I sent like the first 3 chapters. They contacted both our agents and signed it up immediately before it was done and just said, we want this book. So Tom wanted it for stage and he asked Rick to write it. And then Rick became world famous for Jersey Boys and a million other plays. And Rick did the most incredible interpretation of it. And sure enough, it eventually, 6 years later, it made it to Broadway. And it won 5 Tonys.
Yeah.
And it's been in the top 10 of the most produced plays in America for the last decade.
Wow. I've definitely
Really
seen
crazy.
a lot. Again, I am from the Orlando area, and I've definitely seen a lot of productions of it down here.
Have you? Yeah. And they're all different. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them
different.
work, some of them don't, but it's so fun.
It is. It's such a fun story, just the book alone, and seeing it on stage is just amazing.
Well, thanks. We we also we had an amazing experience with the audio
Yeah.
because the guy who read the audio had read all the Harry Potter books in America, and
Wow.
it's really kind of embarrassing. But the audio books, those first two or three audio books, are better than the books because Jim Dale is such an
Yeah.
amazing narrator. He gets all these voices. He called Dave and me up and said, "I want to run through all the voices."
Yeah.
And we went, "What?" And he said, "So Mrs. Bumbrake, uh, she grew up a little bit like that, love."
Yeah.
And he did this perfect accent, not me.
Wow.
Um, and then he said, "But she's been living with the Astors, and they talk very much like this." And he did this other accent, and he
Yeah.
said, "So really, it's a blend." And then he did a perfect blend of the two. And you
Wow.
went, "Who are you?" You
Yeah.
know. So, and he did this for like 15 characters in the book.
Wow.
It was just and Dave and I were on the other end saying, "We really don't think we should have this phone call. Sounds like you've got it pretty much handled."
Wow.
And he won the best audio book for Peter and the Starcatchers and Peter and the Shadow Thief. So
Wow.
the book had a ton of success, and it's been just so much fun. Dave and
Yeah.
I ended up writing, I think, 13 books together. We really had a blast.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really fun. Then he
Yeah.
divorced me.
Yeah. That's awesome. And now let's get into the Kingdom Keepers,
Sure.
which again was how I first found you. I think I was just trying to find something in the elementary school library and came across Kingdom Keepers and saw the
I
first
love
cover
hearing
and
that.
was like, whoa, this looks interesting. And have been a fan ever since.
I just love hearing that.
Yeah. So how did you
Yeah,
come
so
up
I mean,
with the
Kingdom
series?
Keepers Kingdom Keepers also came from a Dave Barry experience because my parents wouldn't take us to the Disney parks.
Yeah.
And so I had never been to the Disney parks and until I got into my 40s. And we wanted to take our kids. And I mentioned this again to Dave Barry. And he said, "You can't go to the Disney parks, Disney World, basically, without me because I'm the world's expert on Disney World." Um, and he was kidding, of course, but we were honored, and so we were going to go
Yeah.
with our two families to Disney World. And Dave and I have this, competitive edge with each other, and
Yeah.
so I was at the time my murder thrillers were published by a division of Disney, and
Yeah.
I called them and said, "Hey, I want to pull a surprise on Dave because he's telling me he's the biggest expert, and I need an expert." And they arranged one. So Dave had no idea any of this was coming. And when we got to Disney World, they put us up in the Floridian for
Yeah.
free.
Wow.
When we got to our room, all our passes for the next 3 days and our kids were in a big fan on our desk.
Wow.
There were cakes on the side tables with our books covers on them that were edible. I mean, they
Wow.
went completely over the top, and they said, "Go to the lobby at 7:30 and meet." And gosh, I wish I could remember her name because she was the coolest person ever. But she was a vested VIP
Yeah.
guide, and so for 3 days we were treated. The person she had toured the week before was John Travolta,
Oh,
and
wow.
and Dave and I are just these little writers, And it's like, wait, you're treating us like John Travolta?
Yeah.
But they did. They spoiled us
Wow.
rotten. And I had been brought up to write thank you notes.
Yeah.
So I wrote my publisher a thank you note for the great surprise. Dave was in
Yeah.
fact really surprised. And then I called him. I wanted to not just write. So I called him and he said, "You really need to thank a person over at Disney Books, a woman named Wendy Lefgon, because she arranged all this. I didn't do anything but
Wow.
make a phone call." So I
Yeah.
called Wendy and I was talking to Wendy and I told her just how enthralled I was by all the attractions. And I said, what gets me as a storyteller is that every ride we were on, and we were on every ride. When you have
Yeah.
a VIP guide, you're on everything 8 times. And I said, there's a beginning, middle, and end to every single attraction,
Yeah.
just like a story. And she said, "Well, have you ever heard of the Imagineers?" And then she sort of started to educate me
Wow.
about how these things are built and designed.
Yeah.
And that, yes, there's about an 80-page storybook written about every ride.
Yeah. Wow.
And it happened that Disney, right at that time, I think this is 2005-ish, was trying to find an author to write a thriller for kids set in their theme parks. And
Oh,
the trouble
wow.
was you couldn't hurt any kids. You
Yeah.
couldn't sabotage any rides. You couldn't have anybody come into the park with a gun or a knife or any weapon. You couldn't really threaten Disney in any way, but they wanted it to be a thriller.
Yeah.
And she said, if you can solve that puzzle, we'll publish it. And I solved the puzzle. So
Yeah.
it took
And
me
you keep
months.
publishing it.
Yeah. I mean, it took me many months and probably 5 different outlines.
Oh,
But the 4th or 5th one I submitted involved holograms because
yeah.
I had gone to this symposium and I'd seen this little thing. You can buy these on the internet. They're like $15. They come with a little plastic pig, and without plugging it in or anything, they project a plastic pig, a pink
Wow.
pig on the top of them. It looks absolutely real, Emma.
Yeah.
It's not translucent. It looks absolutely opaque and real. And on one of the, go to the bathroom breaks, I went up to pick up this pig and my fingers went through it. And I went,
Wow.
I know what has to happen.
Yeah.
If the kids are all light, nothing bad can happen to them, and the lawyers will let me write this. So I wrote it all up and I sent it to Wendy, and the lawyers approved it, and off we went.
Wow.
So it was
That's
really fun.
awesome.
Yeah.
So of course you've written all these books and have gone to like tours and researched all of them, especially the Kingdom Keeper series, like doing private tours around the parks and the cruise lines.
Right.
What has been your most interesting or your favorite location to discover more while researching for this series?
Ooh, that's a big ask. I've
Yeah.
now been in the parks over 30 times after
Wow.
hours,
Yeah.
like at 5 in the morning usually.
Wow.
And so I've been in a very creepy park because even at 5 in the morning, most of the workers, they work on the parks at
Yeah.
night, but those people have gone home. So you're really in an empty park. It's
Wow.
chilly. The sun hasn't risen.
Yeah.
There's only a few lights on. There's no music. Nothing's moving. And it's you and a guide. And the
Wow.
guide, in my case, is always an Imagineer. It's
Yeah.
somebody who knows about the rides I'm trying to go to. So my experience has been both kind of scary and fascinating. I'm
Yeah.
writing furiously in my notebook, but it's creepy. It's
Yeah.
creepy in there when it's quiet. You're so used to all this music and people.
Yeah.
I think most of it is conditioning. You're just so
Yeah.
used to it that when you walk through this thing and it's
Quiet.
yeah, you go, well, this is not terribly comfortable.
Yeah.
So the strangest places I encountered and spent a lot of time in were the Utilidor in Magic Kingdom,
Wow.
which is a 1.5 miles of underground tunnels.
Yeah.
And it's just a fascinating piece of engineering.
Yeah.
Because there's all these rooms down there. There's costumes rooms, there's beauty rooms, there's cafeterias, there's computer servers, there's everything you can imagine.
Yeah.
Including this giant tube that I asked about, and because it was everywhere. And I said, what is that darn tube? And they said, have you ever seen somebody wheeling trash out of Disney, out of the Magic Kingdom? And
Yeah.
I said, well, no. And they said, how much trash do you think is generated in here in a day by 60,000 people, And they suck it out of the parks. They have these giant air sucking tubes, and you go behind the cast member areas and it's all secured, and you drop your bag in and it goes and it's gone. It goes 0.5 mile and gets shot into a trash compactor, and a truck drives it away.
Wow.
And so that kind of discovery, you just go, wait a second, what's going on here? There's so much more than meets the eye when you're in the parks. Equally fascinating was the engine room. I've been to the engine room of a couple of the Disney cruise ships. Just fascinating places. I mean, they have machines that desalinate the water. They have three generators electric generators, each one of which can power a city of 20,000 homes.
Wow.
One is running, one has been overhauled and is ready to run in case you need it. One is being overhauled at the time.
Wow.
And so you're just down there going, all of this is below this ship somehow. I mean,
Yeah.
so, there have just been so many amazing experiences getting into the galleys on the ships.
Yeah.
Fascinating. You wouldn't think a kitchen could be fascinating. Totally
Yeah.
fascinating. All the walk-in freezers and all that stuff. And the Imagineers, who are just brilliant people, there's about 4,000 of them, and they got to know that I was a little bit in awe of, and perhaps even a little afraid of, Maleficent.
Yeah.
From reading my books. I pay Maleficent a great deal of respect. I don't like green
Yes.
people with big chins. So I was in then MGM Parks. We were talking about that a while ago,
Yeah.
which is now Disney Studios. And I was in there at 4:35 in the morning with an Imagineer, and we were going over to Indiana Jones or one of those rides.
Yeah.
And he stopped to get a drink of water at a watering fountain. He said, I'll meet you around the corner. And, I was in a bit of a haze and I wasn't really thinking. So I walked on without him and I turned the corner and there's a 6-foot-tall Maleficent. And she goes, Ridley, what are you doing in my park? And I about had to have a change of underwear. I was just running the other direction. It was like, get out of here. And the guy was laughing
crazy.
and then we went back and shook hands and said hi. But oh my gosh, it was terrifying.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Really fun.
And actually, funny enough that you mentioned Maleficent, obviously the Kingdom Keepers have met and fought a bunch of Disney characters and Disney rides, including like Small World throughout the series.
Yeah.
Which was your favorite to write for?
Villain or scene?
Villain and scene. How about that?
The favorite scene of readers is Small World.
Yeah.
And I revisit it now in the second Inheritance book that I'm writing right now.
Oh, interesting.
In a different way, similar but different way. And I didn't know that at the time. At the time I was just letting my imagination go. And I think, in the case of Small World, I was on my private tour with an Imagineer, and we always walk the attraction first. There's an emergency exit route, and it takes a good long time. It takes about an hour and a half. And I would take notes all along the way of sort of the tricks of the ride, some of which I'm never allowed to talk about, some of which they let me. And we had done that on Small World, and we got back, and the guy said, I know that you usually like to ride the ride at least once or twice after you've walked it. Would you like to ride the ride?
Yeah.
And I said, I really would. I'd love to get a feel for it away from when I hear everybody else. And I said, in fact, maybe we could do it, with no lights and no music.
Yeah.
And he said, sure, hop in. So off we went into a dark Small World. The only thing on in there are those emergency lights when there's a hurricane or something. And they cast really weird shadows along those dolls. I mean, really weird. Half a face and weird shadows onto the other doll. And they're all stuck like this. None of them are moving.
Yeah.
It was extraordinarily creepy. I in fact have one photo that when I'm on the road for my books, I occasionally share. I don't think the Imagineers would love that, but I do. Of just how creepy it is when there's no lights on in there. And then, sure enough, we're through the first scene. I don't remember whether it was the second or the third scene, but out of the corner of my eyes, 2 of the dolls stepped forward. And I just freaked. I jumped out of my seat, full-grown adult.
Yeah.
And the guy who was with me steadies the boat and says, what's wrong with you? And I said, did you not see those dolls move?
Yeah.
He said, Ridley, you're a grown adult. The ride is shut off. The dolls are not moving. And I said, dude, I'm an Eagle Scout. 2 of those dolls just moved. So that's what I had in my notebook, was that I had seen 2 of the dolls move. By the way, I've since met other people who've seen the dolls move. So I'm not completely nuts, but I'm sort of nuts, but I'm not completely nuts. So as a writer, you try to make the world more extraordinary. So as I
Yeah.
was writing that chapter, I had typed, and two of the dolls moved, and I thought to myself, no, 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 all of the dolls moved.
Yeah.
And that just changed everything, made it kind of a Stephen King scene, and readers have loved it. So
Yeah.
that was a favorite scene to write, and I do love writing about Maleficent because
Yeah.
she gives me the creeps, and it's really fun when you find characters. I think we were talking about this earlier, how much I adore Amanda and
Yeah.
Charlene in the series, and you just find characters who speak to you. And Maleficent I've just been a little afraid of Maleficent every time I write her, and I think that's a really interesting place to come from. I don't love the movies. I walked out on the
Yeah.
first movie. I haven't seen the second, just because to me, they were playing with a different beginning to Maleficent
Yeah.
than Disney lore, and so for me, didn't quite work. But
I kind of
uh,
agree with that too.
I mean, I love Angelina Jolie.
Yeah.
It's not her, and it's not the writers. It's just something didn't work for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really love writing her. I love writing Chernabog and Cautionary Tales, a book that's coming out in about a month, October 4th.
Yes.
I have a number of short stories, and Chernabog is in one of them. And he's a character who Walt Disney, who created him, said is the most evil creature on earth. And the
Wow.
most evil character I've ever written. Chernabog eats human souls.
Yeah.
And I went, wait, the happiest guy on earth wrote a character that eats human souls?
Wow.
I've got to write about this. And
Yeah.
at the time, Chernabog was just kind of a Fantasia character.
Yeah.
And so I thought, this is great. I can play with Chernabog. He isn't as established. So I've
Yeah.
had a blast writing Chernabog. And he also terrifies me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've now noticed that they've started selling pins and like having him on parade floats and stuff like ever since. And of course,
I know.
I think my first real experience with Chernabog was the Kingdom Keeper books more so than Fantasia. I had seen
yeah.
Fantasia before, but like didn't really know who he was.
Yeah, you don't really see him. I mean, he's in there quickly and gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he
So
always
of course I got to
fascinated
know
me.
him more with your books. And I
Oh, that's
can't wait
great.
to
I
read
didn't.
Cautionary Tales.
Oh, Cautionary Tales is so fun. I'm so thrilled about this book.
Yeah.
It has this great illustrator, and they asked me to write, 6 or 8 short stories,
Okay.
making them scary stories
Yeah.
using iconic Disney characters. Well,
Interesting.
what greater thing could you ever be
Yeah.
asked to do? So I had to, I would try things and run it by my editor, and she'd say, no, we better try a different character. That's not going to
Yeah.
work for us, and stuff like that, which was great. I mean, it was a process. But so it ended up 8 stories. But as I was writing the stories, I kept thinking that I read short stories quite often, but
Yeah.
they feel kind of disconnected, a lot of short stories
Yeah.
do. And I thought, I don't know that I'm going to love this book if it's just sort of 8 different
Disconnecting.
stories,
Yeah.
And what would you think if I could find 2 characters whose own story was a 9th story, and it weaves
Yeah.
its way through every one of these? And they said, that sounds crazy, but if you can pull it off, let's do it. And
Yeah.
so that's what it is. It's almost a novel because we
Interesting.
follow 2 characters, Billy, a young woman, and Tim, a young man. They find something in the Disney archives that allows them to go into these Disney stories. And then they react with the stories that we know,
Yeah.
making them wrong. And so
Interesting.
through the book, hopefully you get some chills here and there, but
Yeah.
you see characters like Belle and Chernabog and the Headless Horseman and
Oh
on
wow.
and on and on,
Yeah.
with these 2 kids from present day, landing in these places going, where am I now? So
Yeah.
it's a really fun, and they've made it a gorgeous looking book.
Yeah, it
I
looks
just can't
absolutely
wait for it to come out.
gorgeous. I remember, I forget when you posted the first like cover art. I was like, "Ooh, I'm excited for this."
Me
And I've been
too.
like keeping track of everything
Then
ever since.
it's the illustrator, and I'm forgetting her name, but she's a famous illustrator. She did just a brilliant job. There's illustrations all through the book,
Wow.
every other page.
Yeah.
It's got a beautiful cover. They're putting me out on a small tour. It's really going to be a fun book. I hope to get to the parks for the
Yeah.
Mickey Halloween. I don't know if they're going to bring me, but
That'd
that's
be
what I hope.
awesome if they
I
brought
know
you
it.
out.
It's a Halloween book, so I hope
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
So too, especially if you come down to Disney
But
World, because then we could see
October
each other.
4th, if I come to
Yes.
Disney World, you and I are having lunch together.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I'll
Good.
make it happen.
Me too.
Yeah. But yeah, that was my last question because I did have a
Okay.
cautionary tales section, but you answered all of them in your little
Oh, I'm
talk
so
about
excited about that. And then
Oh,
it's been delayed by the pandemic 3
Yeah.
or 4 times now, but finally, the first
so excited.
Disney, which is Kingdom Keepers Inheritance,
Yes.
it's going to be called, I believe it's going to be Kingdom Keepers Inheritance: The Shimmer.
Okay.
And it comes out February 21st in 23, so coming right up. And then there will be one book every February after that for 3
Yeah.
years.
That
And I'm
comes out
so
today after
excited.
my
I've been
birthday.
sitting on this. Oh, great.
Yeah.
Well, come for the signing. I will
Yes.
definitely be doing a signing for that
Okay.
in both parks. And it's sat on shelves for about 3.5 years. So I'm so eager for this to get out. But
Yeah.
I'm just now finishing it up, book 2, and then I still
Wow.
have book 3 to write.
Yeah.
But it's a really fun series because I didn't want to keep writing the same story.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that. So when they said, is there anything else in the Kingdom Keepers world you'd want to tackle? And I said, well, I would love to do the kids of the Kingdom Keepers.
Yeah.
And so we meet the kids of the Kingdom Keepers, see that they got some of the abilities of their fairly parents, and
Ooh.
off they go.
Yeah. I'm so excited for
I'm
that
so
book series.
I'm so
Yeah.
excited too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, please follow him on Instagram at Ridley Pearson for all updates. And of course, in our fandom news section, I'll be saying updates of the Kingdom Keepers books and everything else he's doing. But Ridley, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Emma. What fun. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
We'll see you for lunch in February.
Yes,
Happy
see you
birthday
at
in
lunch.
February.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. The first Broadway revival of August Wilson's The Piano Lesson will now play at the Ethel Barrymore Theatre for its 17-week engagement. The production was originally supposed to come to the St. James Theatre, which is the current home of the Into the Woods revival. Star Wars revealed that its Rogue One spin-off series Andor has been delayed. Instead of being released on August 31st, Andor will now debut on September 21st on Disney+. The series will also debut with a 3-episode premiere as opposed to releasing with just 2. Into the Woods has extended its Broadway run by 8 weeks, which will now have a closing date of October 16th at the St. James Theatre. The Flash will end following its upcoming 13-episode 9th season. Now, this marks the end of an era for the CW, as The Flash instantly became one of the network's most watched shows upon its debut in 2014, and has remained one of the most popular series on the network ever since. Lena Hall and Andrew Call are going to join the cast of Little Shop of Horrors beginning in September as Audrey and Orin, respectively. Marvel's Secret Invasion will be a, quote, crossover event series, end quote, that, quote, showcases a faction of shape-shifting Skrulls who have been infiltrating Earth for years, end quote. The show will also feature more familiar faces as well as plot points that intersect with the rest of the MCU. The world premiere of High Noon, based on the Academy Award-winning film of the same title, will arrive on Broadway in 2023, written by Eric Roth and directed by Michael Arden. DC has no plans to release its previously planned and fully filmed Batgirl movie in theaters or on the HBO Max streaming service. Dylan Klena, which is the brother of Derek Klena, Lauren Channel, Jane McLeod, Chris Hotch, and more are joining the cast of the Jagged Little Pill tour. Marvel's She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, is going to be streaming new episodes on Thursdays instead of on Wednesdays like all the Disney Plus Marvel shows before it. James Monroe Iglehart, Philippa Sue, Stephen Pasquale, and Jesse Mueller will lead Guys and Dolls at the Kennedy Center. The upcoming Joker sequel, officially titled Joker Folie à Deux, starring Lady Gaga and Joaquin Phoenix as Harley Quinn and Joker, will be released on October 4th of 2024 in theaters. Angelica Ross will play Roxy Hart in Chicago beginning next month, which is September, becoming the first openly trans woman to play a leading role in a Broadway musical. Lilius White will play Hermes in Hadestown beginning in September. Audra McDonald will lead Ohio State Murders at the James Earl Jones Theater beginning in November. And last but certainly not least, the unofficial Bridgerton musical live in concert at the Royal Albert Hall in London has been cancelled following recent lawsuits for the Barlow and Bear team. Now let's get into that outro. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Fan Fatales. We are a proud part of the Real Fans Podcast Network. And if you want to check out more shows on the network, you can find them on rf4rm.com. Join us next week where I will be chatting with my good friend and former castmate of Children of Light, Julie, as we sort some of our beloved characters into Hogwarts houses, including the Kingdom Keepers. Remember to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast, and subscribe to us on YouTube. Please leave us a review and comment down below to tell us what you think of the show, and remember to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at FanFatelesPod for the latest updates and to possibly be featured in a future episode. Now my Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok are all at SnippyEmma, which is SNIPPYEMMA. Our editing is by the wonderful Carol Linsmeyer. As always, thanks for tuning in. Bye! The views expressed in this episode do not reflect the brand of the company they are about.